It is a great honor to have His Excellency, Ambassador Laurel, here today. As many of you know, His Excellency comes from one of the great families of the Philippines, intricately involved in the establishment of the Philippine Constitution, of the establishment of the rule of law, of independence, as well as bringing golf, bringing the game of golf to the Philippines. That was one of the little tasks that, your grandfather, I think, actually brought to the Philippines. It is in these testing times where stress and strain in the international order, is so apparent. I think it's very, very important to step back and listen to a little bit of the wisdom of people, of a family that has actually built a nation, that has been intricately involved in establishing diplomacy, in this case here, particularly between Japan and the Philippines. I'm very, very much looking forward to your remarks. And please, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jesper. Thank you very much for your kind welcome. For this morning, I was asked to share my views on the outlook for Asia, and I'm glad to do so. But first, allow me to thank the Asian Society of Japan for bringing us together at this vital time so that we can ponder on the great potentials of our region. It's hard to overstate the obvious. Asia is on the cusp of a historical transformation. While it might be too much early to size up the system-level impact of Asia's rise with regards to the shift of power distribution and the resulting changes in the political and economic structures, it is never too early to lay down the groundwork for a successful transition. Let us recall briefly Asia's potentials. While it comes to a population of the size of 1/3 of the world, 4.7 billion people reside in Asia. This is 66% of the world's population. On growth prospects of the region, despite the unprecedented economic blowdown by COVID-19, Asia is projected to remain as the fastest growing region in the world, with roughly about 5.7% growth for 2022. Should Asia sustain the momentum of growth, the region will become the epicenter of global prosperity by 2050, producing more than half of the world's GDP and accounting for the world's output on trade and investments. As Asia reemerges as the center of the world's economy, it will be in its interest for the rest of the world to march with it to prosperity. The fruits of Asia's century should be enjoyed by Asians, but also by the rest of the world. In many writings in the 20th century, historians have drawn attention to the ethos and worldview of the West on what the world should be like as a rationale for many of the policies adopted to meet the challenges and opportunities for those. This explains why globalization at the turn of the century took the form of a westernization. The westernization of globalization resulted in the marginalizing of non-Western thoughts and institutions, as well as the exclusion of hundreds of millions of people from the prosperity that is globalized and offered. As the Asian century unfolds, we need to get a few things right. On getting things right, I am reminded of my grandfather, the late President P. Laurel, who was a believer of values rooted in Confucius thoughts. At the heart of the Confucius philosophy, he would say, are profound thoughts in human conditions that much is to teach us. The philosophy of Confucius finds continued relevance to our thinking and action on a broad sweep of issues, particularly on traditions for governance. And Confucius was quoted as governing the country with moral is like the Northern Star in its center position. We speak of the importance of traditional values for governance. I refer to those values that seek to protect societies from the decadent influences. Values that drive us to more of our family, towards our family and community than others prioritize the peaceful settlement of issues, place great emphasis on learning and give importance to tolerance of diversity. The past century witnessed the rise of individualism in both intellectual thought and political and economic systems. Max Weber identified the emergence of a modern Western capitalism in relation to the puritanical values of hard work. In his work, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Weber theorized connection between the Protestant strong work ethics and the echoes of an associated economic system. Unfiltered individualism, however, encourages global actors to make decisions solely on the basis of self-interest and materialism. In the face of shrinking resources, we bear witness to the appealing inequities between countries. Many of the world's multilateral framework now find it challenging to deliver on their mandate of protecting critical public goods intended to support humanity's well-being, for the global economy, to the health of our planet. If we want the Asian century to deliver our common aspirations for peace, sustainable development, and human rights, dignity for all, we must, beyond ourselves, go and start caring for our neighbors. Japan's diplomacy with the sense of caring and robustness is a case in point. After achieving its status as Asia's original modern economy, Japan took the leadership role to aid the policy of its neighbors and to the world. Japan's official development assistance stood at $13.6 billion in 2020, making Japan the largest donor in Asia. It has recently set the bar by contributing $3.4 billion in International Development Association in support of the World Bank's global poverty reduction. My country has greatly benefited from Japan's beneficial presence. Today, Japan is building the first subway in the Philippines. Unknown to many, Japan is quite quietly working to support peace and development in southern Philippines. Japan is also supporting our aspirations for a stronger archipelago with the recent delivery of the multi-response vessels to the Philippine Coast Guards. In Southeast Asia, Japan has fully consistently supported ASEAN's effort for peace, stability, prosperity, development in the Asian region. Recently, Japan announced the strengthening of initiatives for the Asian outlook of the Indo-Pacific, which shares common basic principles with its own concept of free and open Indo-Pacific. An alarming consequence of the inequitable distribution of resources is the escalation of conflicts as a result of climate change and the growth of development of resources. It is feared that the disputes within and between states may become more common in the future. Those who will be called upon to lead the Asian century will need all the knowledge, skills, and wisdom they can muster to meet the daunting challenge. While all disputes and conflicts are unique and require specific approaches for solutions, the United Nations Charter bids members to settle their disputes peacefully. And the Charter offers clear directions on how to achieve this. However, it has to review its Charter on the basis of the changing times. Article 33 is set out as a number of methods, including juridical, arbitration, resort to regional arrangements, and other peaceful means and choice. In my view, despite disputes are settled with the antagonism, are given the opportunity to find a peaceful resolution to their dispute for which they can feel their ownership. Let me add a few fundamentals, including inclusivity impartiality of the resolution process, mode of resolution must be within the framework of international law, coherence and consent of the parties. Within the Southeast Asian region, the 10 ASEAN countries are more prospective in preventive diplomacy and confidence building to prevent disputes from escalating into major conflicts. In 1994, the ASEAN established the Regional Forum as a platform of ways securing dialogue for the Asia-Pacific region. Over time, the ARF has become the world's largest security discussion forum involving 27 members, including the European Union and others. The forum is able to provide a setting where members can discuss current security issues and develop cooperative measures to enhance peace and security in the region. Given the success of the ASEAN, I am of the view that international organizations should be proactive to prevent diplomacy, good offices, facilitation, and dialogue by providing a venue where states can emerge and engage in discussions. International organizations can do a great deal behind the scenes to help parties find a way to settle the difference between their conflict and become public. I have the preventive diplomacy. I know that the preventive diplomacy measures are not easy to adopt. We have to recall, though, that while we pay for the cost of prevention in the present, we are certain to reap the benefits that it brings in the distant future. The main lesson to be drawn from conflicts of the past centuries is that earlier the root causes of a potential conflict are identified through discussions. The more likely it is for the parties to engage in a constructive dialogue to find a peaceful resolution to their disputes. The Asian century coincides with the dawn of a new era brought by unprecedented technological change. The fourth industrial revolution, as we call it, has spread faster than it was thought of. In 1965, Gordon Moore, the co-founder of a computing giant, Intel, made a prediction about the rate of progress in the computing world. Moore's law postulates that a transition becomes smaller. The number of data that could fit into a computer chip would be double that in 2 years. Moore's prediction has come true in the past decade, and it has been used by many industries to give goals for technological advancement. Following Moore's law, which provides that technological progress will increase exponentially rather than the linear we can reasonably expect that there will be 20,000 years of progress in the next 100 years. At this pace, we expect many new technology to spread at a speed that is faster than what we can think of. For countries to equitably reap the fruit benefits of the fourth industrial revolution, we should endeavor to provide better direction and such that it will benefit humanity. A particular focus is needed on the strengthening of our investment in people through quality education. Conversational and conventional education systems are struggling to deliver the knowledge and skills we need for a more sustainable and just future. As a result of the challenges brought about by the pandemic, we are now having the opportunity to reimagine education. We can draw a flexible delivery method of education and digitalize technologies to reach the young. We can explore forward-looking systems that can deliver inclusive and equitable quality education. We need to support policies that seek to protect and increase education spending all over the world. We need to push for programs that places education at the heart of international solidarity for debt management and simul packages to official development assistance. Education is a preemptive public good known as the great equalizer. It unlocks opportunities and is the primary enabler for sustainable development and goals. The embrace of differences in religion, in culture, in opportunity, in behalf, and in the way of life has long been the driving force for human progress. History has known that every society achieved global dominance during its time had been extraordinarily pluralistic and tolerant in the course of its rise to preeminence. The great emperor Abu Akbar flourished by observing strategic tolerance. Akbar's court was filled with Hindus as well as Muslims, intellectuals, artists, musicians, and he even tried in every way to systematically treat all his subjects accordingly. The Yale law professor Amy Chua, in her book Day of the Empire, the emperor even practiced multicultural copulation. He intermarried with 300 wives, including Afghans and South Indians, Turks, Persians, and 2 Christian women from Portugal, while the domination of others proved the path of least resistance in the centuries past. The Asian century calls for a healthier dose of introspect. Let us avoid failing in the trap of separating people in us and them, fueling the diversity of the world in which we live in. Instead, we should practice better, a way of life based on mutual understanding and respect for others. In closing, Asia's rise is no means preordained, although this conclusion founded on Asia's major economies. The present growth momentum is promising. It is, however, not just easily attained. As Asia rises to preeminence, it will need a great transition. It's in itself from a passive participant in the debate for global rule making and a following of rules to actively be spoken and debated. With the right tools and correct moral orientation, we must make sure that our goals for a just, equitable, prosperous, and sustainable world turns into reality for the billions of people who have justified expectations for a vigorous Asian century. That is what I would like to say. In the end, it is not wealth. It is the right moral orientation, whether you are a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a Hindu. If you believe in a creator, you know what it is to be proper and right. You don't have, it is a matter that you should practice for everyone, whether you are a Japanese, a Jew, a Filipino, a Russian, and there should be respect for every human being in this world. Thank you very much. And Jesper, you have now the floor after saying.
You're actually, I mean, what can I say? You know, you go from Max Weber to Moore's Law to Emperor Akbar. You go and talk about strategic tolerance, and you talk about the necessity for a strong moral compass. And I think we would all agree with that particularly in these daunting times, you know, a strong moral compass is something that we need. Now, I want to bring it down a little bit to the practical level.
To the ground.
To a little bit, you know, to the practical ground. You know, if I recollect correctly, in your speech, you talked about the ASEAN. Mm-hmm. You know, really the diversity of Asia having, you know, come together, having created a forum to, you know, actually put into practice, you know, preventative, you know, discussions. Now, over the last couple of years, this sort of big picture, multilateral forum, you know, the big boys, right? The big boys, which is to say the United States and, you know, Japan, have gotten together and have created the Quad, right? We've got India, we've got Australia, we've got Japan, we've got the United States of America. Do you see, I mean, how do you interpret and what are your views on what has happened with the development of the Quad there? Is this something that is welcomed by the ASEAN countries? Is this something that is a threat? Could we have another round of, as it were, the consensus and the forum of the diversity of Asia, right, being actually steamrolled, so to speak, by the big powers getting together?
Well, if you really look at it, in the end, we should look at ourselves and consider others other than our own needs, because in the end, it's just wearing the mask. This is not only for your protection, but for others, and that you are considering others first other than yourself. This is very important because this is an Oriental value that family and your direct family should be given the chance, not just yourself. The individualism that occurs, particularly in the West, is because for the longest time, the royalty has been getting all the benefits. The poorer class, what they call the serfdom, did not have it. That is in the old country. That is Europe. America experimented more than 250 years ago by having what they call democracy. We, the people, rule. Japan had the same. Today, we think we like freedom, but freedom is a matter that is emanating from selflessness rather than self-centeredness. And as Orientals, we understand this, that I would give my last meal to my grandchild rather than to me. And this is what the Asians have in common. The family comes first. The small child is the future of our race. And that is supposed to be understood implicitly without having to be taught. But the selflessness of even democracy sometimes gets corrupted. I see it in America today. How, and I'm not supposed to say this, how can an American president whose fundamental ideas of the creation under the Constitution says we the people in the Declaration of Independence, by divine right declare ourselves free to choose our leaders. The old rule was, I was born to rule. The kings, emperors of Russia and of England, this is a divine right. If you question the results of the elections in America, that goes against the very principles of what America is. And what is that? Selfishness, self-centered. The biggest problem we have is in Russia now. The old idea of the empire of the Tsar is still in the mind of somebody. We in Asia, in Europe, and the United States, we're very far away from that. But we're being affected. My daughter tells me, Grandpa, you gave me a car. Yes, because you graduated with high honors. But I can't use it. Why? Gasoline is very expensive. I have nothing, she has nothing to do with the war in Ukraine. But today, she says, Pa, the problem is inflation, the food that we eat is very expensive. The world has become very small, as I said, on the matter of more. But everything that we do now, by push of the button, I can get information of what's happening in Sudan. When I was growing up, it took roughly about a whole day before you get what is the result that is happening in Uganda or Idi Amin. The world has shrunk. So we should, in essence, be caring for one another. And whatever you do for your brethren, it will always come back to you. Not necessarily directly, but it will be given back to you through your friend or your relative, your wife, or your great-grandchildren. They will remember the kindness that was given. And this is what is important. This is what we should look at now. Because if we do this in the century of Asia, then we can teach even the oldest of our civilization to be more kinder, more pleasant, and more understanding. And that is what my grandfather did. He took his 6 boys, sent them to the 4 corners of the world, understand what mankind really needs, and be kind. Because in the ultimate end, I am an ambassador because my father was a good man. And my father became ambassador, and my uncles became great bankers and leaders because they were exposed to other civilizations. And my grandfather taught them how to respect and behave like true human beings, caring for one another. My mother is a half Spaniard. My grandsons are Germans. She is 1/4 German. She's a flighter. And my other grandson carries a name called Stemmeyer. And they're coming this Saturday. And all I said to my children was, why a German? He says, they're very nice. And I said, and I look at them and says, no, the Germans are very strict and all that stuff, you know.
We are.
I know.
I know. You know,
but
getting stricter by the moment.
And that is precisely what I'm saying. So, that is the real message that I'm trying to say.
Ambassador, can I tilt the conversation a little bit? Because you've been so intricately involved with Japan. You have such a passion for Japan. You talk about education and the importance of education, that we do need to, if we want to create a better future, we have to invest more in the education of our children, of our grandchildren. You know, your children, your grandchildren, you yourself, Japanese university. Tell me a little bit about, your relationship with Japan, and, then also perhaps a little bit about the role that you see from your experience that Japan will play in creating a brighter future for Asia.
The values of the Japanese are very Oriental. When I say Oriental, it's not the Occidental, it's not the Western side of it.
You mean the individualistic, the selfish side, right?
Yeah, not only the selfish side. It's the way,
Germans are not selfish.
No, Germans are basically humans also. They care for their children. The Japanese have a certain way of bringing up children. At a certain age, they're spoiled. But at a certain age, maybe about after the age of puberty, the regimen of discipline comes into play. I have a son and two nephews. They studied in the best schools here. One was Keio, and the other one was Kyodai. And I will tell you that they tell me the hardest part of getting into the university is the entrance. Only 7% get in. But after you get in, it's a song. It's easy. And if you just follow the rules and study, you'll graduate. I am exposed to the Western culture. My brother, the elder brother, was from Wharton School of Management, University of Pennsylvania. My other brother is from Northwestern of Kellogg School, But today, I feel that the safety, and this is not something that occurs regularly, of Asians, even in New York or Chicago or LA. I know the place pretty well. I was brought up by Christian brothers from Philadelphia and New York. You can't walk in Oregon. I was talking to the Secretary of Finance of the Philippines. He has a house in Portland. Somebody breaks into your house, you call the police don't come. Why? Because the police are afraid. If they react and things happen, they might go to jail. Just like in the central state of Michigan or Wisconsin. They're accused of things that happen, and they're trying to do their job. I was watching a Chinese old lady was kicked on CCTV just because she had chinky eye. Or you have to better live in a place where there are Asians, Japanese or Chinese, because you're not white. That is not right. I told my grandchildren, you're not going to Fontainebleau in Paris to study architecture or Colombia. You're going to Tokyo because you are safer here. You can even go and nightclub and jam with the Korean dancers.
You
and
go
come
to
home.
nightclubs. You don't go to nightclubs.
No, she
you,
doesn't.
you should try.
So you see, the safest place today, in my opinion, is basically Japan. As a society, they're more tolerant, they're more understanding. Of course, the old folks say, oh, it's different. The children are different now. But that's part of what you have to have in tolerance. The tolerance is very important. And today I'm trying to still teach. You know, she's the eldest of her family. She has twin sisters who are just 8 years old. They're still learning what the world is. Oh, they're spoiled.
Because spoiled by grandpa.
No. A grandpa doesn't spoil them. It's basically, I taught their father and their mother the Japanese way. When you reach a certain age, oh, it is so cute. But at the age of 12, discipline comes in. You fix your own room, fold your own bed, and don't give me excuses for failing. Because there are only two things I was told, and I am a product of the war. My father was in Sugamo with my grandfather. Sugamo prison. The Americans incarcerated us. My family suffered the war most. In the Philippines, my father was in Fort Santiago, incarcerated by the Japanese. In Japan, 3 months in Kamioka for debriefing and 22 months in Sugamo prison where the trials were being made. And when we got to the Philippines, my grandfather and my father were also charged with treasonable collaboration with the enemy by the Philippine government. Fortunately, they were not found guilty. Today, they're considered heroes. But to me, I couldn't eat rice the way I wanted. It was always lugaw, in Japanese, okayu. Not whole, but watered rice. My milk was never low fat and all that. It was alms, watered down. I didn't have very good shoyu because the shoyu I had was already more than a year and a half. It was viscous. And I didn't have a father for 3 years and 6 months because he was in jail. And I'm the second son. I never saw brand new clothes until I was 8 years old because it was always hand-me-down from clothes to even shoes. And Francis Hag, the Honorable Koji Haneda, knows, is crazy about shoes. He buys half a dozen shoes. And I said, that's too much. He says, Kuya Joe is older brother. We didn't have shoes when we were growing up. I'm addicted to having shoes. I said, that's bad. You are now Imelda.
Now, from the audience, any questions? Yes, please. Yes, of course you should stand up. And if you could quickly announce who you are.
All right. Good morning. Ambassador Laurel, thank you very much for a very encompassing speech from geopolitics to your personal life. It was very interesting for me. My name is Christine Cunanan. I'm a resident of Tokyo, Filipino citizen. And I was just wondering about your thoughts on the upcoming presidential elections in the Philippines, considering the implications of these elections on the region as a whole, the geopolitical implications of the turnout for the elections. Thank you.
Well,
You knew you couldn't hide, right?
before I became the ambassador, I am the highest living elected official among the Laurels. I was a governor, and my only claim to fame is that I don't write books that well. I don't even have, my only claim to fame is I am the only opposition governor that won during martial law against Ferdinand Edrelin Marcos. I have in writing, as a matter of fact, President Marcos is writing, acknowledging that he owes, as you know, his life 7 times 7, which is eternal in the Jewish sense, to the Laurels. He would not be alive if my grandfather and the DNA existed in 1939 for the murder of Nalundasan, the Nalundasan case. In 1949, he wanted to become a congressman. He comes from Ilocos. And in 1949, the president was an Ilocano, a classmate of my grandfather, Elpidio Quirino. And he said, "Are you crazy? You're going to run as a nationalist? Because I owe the decision." No, the decision was on the basis of facts. You run on the basis of reality. You will lose. He wanted to become a senator in 1957. My grandfather and I was alive already. I was 13 years old, and he was telling, "Vote for Marcos. Laurel has 9 candidates." He says, "There are only 8 at that time, senators. The 9th is Marcos. Who do we take out? It's up to you. But don't forget Marcos." Marcos, because of that, became #1. You're going to ask me why I don't like Marcos. Marcos was a classmate of my father. My father was the class president. He was the leader before he was sent to Japan. I cannot campaign because I am now a diplomat. It is prohibited. However, on the private side of it, I tell myself and my people, vote for the most rational decision that you can make, and that is on the basis of qualification, education, and moral standards. And they asked me, "What about Marcos?" I said, "Well, he hasn't finished his school. He claims to be a graduate of Oxford. I know even the current Emperor of Japan studied in Oxford. He had a very good Filipino friend who became a doctor. I met the doctor, the Filipino doctor. And he says, he didn't graduate there. My brother is from the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton. And I asked my brother, did he finish in Wharton? No. There you go. Then secondly, people who, my experience, who do not experience difficulty, hardship builds character. And if you survive with the proper moral orientation, you become a better man. And that is my answer. Will that satisfy you now?
Sir, just considering the surveys are all pointing to a particular result, do you have any, considering the surveys are pointing to a particular result at the moment, do you have any comments on that? Because, you know, with Asia and with the United States and China all in the region, and with all these geopolitical issues in the region, the outcome of the Philippine presidential election has, I think, a huge impact on the state of affairs from this point on.
The question really is, who has the right moral bearing for the Philippines to come out? Russia? America? Japan? You can answer it yourself. Japan has still the higher level of moral ascendancy. Biden is trying very hard, but the country is divided. Even the United Kingdom, they already question the moral standards of Boris Johnson about the rules on COVID parties. He does that. They say he doesn't tell the truth and all that stuff. Germany is being questioned not because of their leadership, but because of the necessity to bring down the oil prices. And, you know, 1 billion a day is bought for the energy from Russia. So what does Germany say? We have to study again, because the European need for energy is fueling the cost of the war against the Ukrainians, and they are giving the money to the Russians, to Putin. Nobody at this point in time can say so. I was too young to become the politician. I should have waited for 10 years and waited that their fathers became older. When I became, at that age of 45, I realized no success outside of the family will compensate failure in the home. That's why I quit politics. And that is my greatest pride today. You're a Filipina? How many years have you been here?
Sir, 25 years.
Okay. Google who is the top fashion designer in the Philippines. His name is Ramon Jose Laurel. He's my eldest son. He's my eldest son. And he is the #1 most expensive fashion designer. Ambassador Koji knows that. My youngest son, daughter is coming in. She is the highest paid and most successful makeup artist. You know Lea Salonga, no? Oh, Sarah G, Geronimo, or all of those people who are very famous. She's the one that makes up. You know, her father is a very famous designer, interior designer. I am proud of my children. She is the first summa cum laude in my family. Ito. And it took some time to hone them. That is what I mean. No success. And that was the statement of my grandfather. So you're asking me, the Filipino people will have to choose. It's not me. I can only influence them. And honestly, I can even, at the age of 78, look up to the sky and say, Lord, take me now. And I'm ready to go anytime because I've done my job. And I've done it cleanly, rightfully, and leave the legacy of my forebearers to my third generation. And that is the answer, Madam.
Tony.
Previously we had the Indian ambassador speak here not too long ago, and we talked about proof of Japanese relationships with South Asian countries, especially India and Myanmar. There was huge cultural exchanges, and there was a whole Japanese effort to create inter-Asian cultural exchange and diplomacy. And one of Japan's pretenses for World War II was to defend Asia against Western colonialism. And how do you feel about this? In spite of the war propaganda, do you feel that Japan was more of a defender of Asia than a colonialist itself?
Well, if you really look at it from a very neutral point of view, Japan was an ally of the West until the League of Nations. The West did not treat Japan properly. They were not given the voting rights by the West, by the United States and Great Britain, France. Woodrow Wilson was the guy that he got sick, and it was his wife who was running the show. And when that happened, the Japanese felt second-class members of the world of nations. As you know, at that time, and even now, the Japanese did not have natural resources. 80% of their importation of their fuel was imported from the United States. They could be stopped. And that is one of the reasons why when China was opened up after, the last emperor had fallen in 1911, and history will tell you why is it that the Europeans were allowed to go into China and Japan was not. At that time, it was colonialism. Why was not Japan allowed? They got the Philippines by buying us out from Spain for $20 million and made peace in the Treaty of Paris in 1898. We were sold by the Spanish for 5 colonies. You know what the colonies were? You were going to talk about it? Hawaii, Guam, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Philippines. Now, my attitude is very simple. Don't forget what is the past, because you will repeat it again in the future. Treat again every man under the sun as equal as you are. And this has been proven right. I'm a golfer. Not as good as my grandson, who is now a member of the Philippine Amateur team. His handicap now is 0-1. He's damn good. I only went down to 7. My grandfather brought the game after, William Howard Taft, who recognized the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association, in 1931, because he was a very good friend of Bobby Jones, who made the Masters. Who was the immediate past champion? His name is Hideki Matsuyama. First Asian champion at the Masters. Who is the current U.S. Ladies Open champion? She's half Japanese. And what is the other half? Filipino. We're as good as anyone if we are properly disciplined. We respect everyone. That's why we are great lovers. We have mixed blood. This is all what I ask of my fellow Filipinos. I demand the same thing to my first to my fellow Filipinos rather than the rest of the world. Respect, respect, respect. Discipline, discipline, discipline. And we can get along well. And I hope I can invite you when I am properly healed with my sciatic nerve in 10 months after I return. And I hope that answers your question.
Salamat po.
Walang anuman.
Any additional questions from the floor?
Yeah, hi, I'm Cecilia Mellon from Asian Technology Advisors. And I wanted to ask actually about the relationship with China and the Philippines. It seems to have changed since Duterte came into power, some softening towards China or maybe more friendliness toward China than in the past. And is it conceivable that Philippines would align itself with China? And how do you view now, I mean, of course, very friendly relationship with Japan, but what is in the future now and with the election and orientation towards China, do you think? Thank you.
Well, that is a multi-layered question in the sense that, yes, the president has opened up certain corridors as a realistic acceptance of what China has become. It's the biggest populated nation in the world. When I was growing up, the Catholic Church, which I am a Catholic, says don't control population. Today, what is the basis of my prediction? What I tell people, population is the basis of sustained economic growth because it has consumption. Why is Japan, and you are here in Japan, having problems with their economy? Because their growth rate and population is negative. We have to import caregivers, housekeepers, and workers in construction from the Philippines. Philippines is overpopulated by 112 million now. 12 million are abroad. My consul general is here. We have to rush after so many minutes from now. We are ongoing. The question really is, it's like India. India has refused to sign the condemnation of Russia in the United Nations. It's a practical thing. But again, as I said, sit down, if you're the leader of your country, and think of the moral orientation and the consequences of their decisions down the road. And that is something that I cannot predict, because at my young age of 78, I don't know how many years I'll still have to live. And that is something, there is one thing I will tell you. My cousins, my first cousins, whose children come from Speaker Laurel, have left not because of their own desires, the relationship with China, because it turned into communists in 1949. We were very close to the Chiang Kai-shek government, the Sung sisters, and all of that. We don't have connections with Red China. We had an ambassador that lived for 26 years, who just recently died of a heart attack. He had lived in China, could not get back in time when Marcos declared martial law. His name was Ambassador Santa Romana. He was 4 years behind me on video and all that stuff, you know, Zoom. He would call me Chief, because I was in the ROTC, you know, the Reserve Officers Training Program in school. I am only a major. That guy could have told you. But in the end, anything that is contrary to human morals, history will tell you that it will not last. It will not last. And 100 years today is going to be 50 years tomorrow, because even the United States did not last, and is not going to last more than 100 years. Napoleon was short. The Romans were longer. England ended up after the First World War. If you do not have that moral conscientiousness, I tell you that I can predict it will collapse, because we will never be together. And my own cousins who studied in Germany, who speaks German. I says, what's happening in Germany, you know? Angela is gone. No, everything's going to be fine, this, that. But again, the answer is, if you can win friends and influence people, the morality is very important, even among ourselves. You don't like to be with somebody that is braggadocious, bullying, but you like to be with somebody who is fun, who's respectful, who gives you that space that you can enjoy. This is the real fact of life. So you're going to ask me about China? I will tell you right now. I was with former Prime Minister Taro Aso yesterday. My old friend and from Davao, who went to Ateneo. I come from Lasal. We were rivals. Since 1961, he's now the finance minister. He's a rich man. And I tell him, Sonny, why we have to go to Taro Aso and all that stuff? And I said, why? Oh, I owe him the favor. This. In the end, he left this morning, and I said, I can't bring him. I was speaking engagement with the Asian Society as introduced by Ambassador Aneda. Oh, that's all right. You just come back. We'll see each other after the election. I said, what's your prediction? He said, he said, whatever, it's just like Doris Day, que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. And I said, well, my prediction is the guy that takes over your post is going to have a hard time when Marcos takes over if he wins. Because people will not pay taxes unless they believe that the guy on top pays his taxes. And the perception of Filipinos is Marcos did not pay his taxes. And then he says, then what? Then, after 5 years, things will go back. Because the build programs, which I personally supervised in Japan and executed in the Philippines, the two guys that were handling it, the Secretary of Transportation and the Secretary of Public Works, did a good job. Not a penny spent for graft. And that will pay back when all these projects have been completed. And he will be gone, Marcos, by the 6th year. And we will be on our road, on our way again to development. That is your answer.
Ambassador, thank you very, very much. I mean, you've given us such great insights, and thank you very